On March 21, 2021, an up-and-coming young Russian oligarch and his wife touched down in their private jet at tiny Klysuhin airport in the Swiss Alps. It's a wedding anniversary celebration, and they're on their way to a luxurious ski vacation. Klysuhin is the gateway to the famed resort of Zermatt, where the elite go to ski and to party. Klysuhin is still an hour's drive from the slopes, so the truly wealthy take a short walk across the tarmac and board helicopters to take them directly to the slopes. The oligarch's name is Vladislav Klyushin, and at this moment, he's at the absolute height of his powers. He's built a fabulously successful company, he's cultivated connections at the highest levels of the Russian government, and he works for the office of the Russian president, Vladimir Putin. But what the oligarch doesn't know is that U.S. law enforcement has been monitoring the flight since it left Moscow, and they want to charge him with crimes that go to the heart of the American financial system. The victims are investors in iconic American companies, including names on the cutting edge of the U.S. economy like Tesla, Snapchat, and Roku. At stake is the integrity of American capital markets. It's all part of the dangerous underworld of the global financial system. One veteran Russian spy tells me the Kremlin sees financial markets as America's strength and a target to attack. To protect him, we agreed to conceal his identity. But this man, who worked for Vladimir Putin's intelligence service, says the case of Vladislav Klyushin was just one small part of a much bigger Russian operation against Western finance. Klyushin's story is just the part that we can see.
It's a war right now happening between Russia and the West. Finances and banks and financial sector itself is just one of the battlefields.
I'm Eamon Javers, and this is the story of Putin's traitor.
The story begins when veteran FBI investigator B.J. Kang gets a tip from the Securities and Exchange Commission, which has spotted a pattern of unusual and suspicious activity in the stock market. They suspect insider trading. Someone is getting financial information ahead of time, against the law, and cashing in on Wall Street.
The information we got early on was there were a number of traders. They were just hitting it out of the park.
Kang is one of the FBI's most storied financial crime investigators. He's busted some of the most notorious Wall Street criminals of all time. He was there for the arrest of Ponzi scheme mastermind Bernie Madoff, and he perp-walked insider trader Raj Rajaratnam. That's why Reuters once called him the most feared man on Wall Street.
We worked it as a regular insider trading case. Just go after the evidence and then follow the evidence and see where that takes you.
Working with Kang is Stephen Frank, the veteran prosecutor who led the Varsity Blues case against rich parents who corrupted the American college admissions process. Frank began his career as a reporter before going to law school and becoming a prosecutor. Using that experience, he sizes up the tip that came in from the SEC.
We knew that somebody was up to no good, and we knew that the scale of it was pretty big because it was happening quarter after quarter in stock after stock, and all of these different people were trading on it, and they were making a lot of money. So the brazenness of it was really striking to us.
The tip reveals that foreign traders are targeting the biggest American companies, well-known brands like Tesla and Roku, as well as lesser-known companies like the financial firm SS&C Technologies and the electronics company Avnet. And millions of dollars in illicit profits for the traders mean millions of dollars in losses for regular investors in American markets.
It's really unfair to have people sitting in the comfort of their offices overseas behind a wall that they think protects them, taking advantage, stealing information, and trading on it to the detriment of investors all over the world. But at the very beginning, we were like, are we ever really going to be able to figure this out? And even if we can figure it out, are we ever going to be able to lay hands on these people?
The FBI agents knew the overseas traders were making mysterious and enormous profits in the U.S. stock market. They suspected the explanation might be a computer intrusion, a hack, but they had to figure out where the traders were getting their information.
We went after the IPs, the domains. Whatever information that we got, we went after it. Subpoenas, court orders, search warrant. Subpoenas, court order, search warrant. Just wash, rinse, repeat.
A lot of those subpoenas went to Western companies that had access to the suspects' digital history, emails, texts, photos, and videos documenting their lives. The FBI was able to obtain a mountain of documentation, and buried in all that data was one striking fact. The SEC reported that all of the targeted companies had one thing in common. They used the same filing agents.
Before this case started, I didn't know what a filing agent was. I've been in this business for a long time. I've worked in securities fraud, and I didn't know that there was an entire industry of companies that assist publicly traded companies to file their required reports with the SEC. But they do exist, there's a number of them, and what was unique here was that all of these different companies in all these different sectors were using two of these filing agents to file their quarterly earnings reports.
So that's the big light bulb moment.
That was a big light bulb moment.
Federal prosecutor Seth Costo works alongside Stephen Frank on the case. He sees what the hackers are doing inside the filing agents' computers.
They obtain the usernames and passwords for employees at the filing agents. And as a result, we're able to log in, like you or I might log into our office accounts, and look through the confidential information of any company they wanted at any time.
And then they discover indications that the filing agent computers have been sending data to a network of offshore computers, and someone had taken steps to hide that traffic. Still, they left behind a clue. Someone had to pay for those computers, and that someone paid for them with Bitcoin. Investigators discover the IP address for the computer that made the Bitcoin transaction.
We were watching the hack play out in real time, even as the filing agents were doing everything they could to lock out the hackers.
When they trace back that IP address, they discover exactly where the cyber attack is coming from. It's coming from Moscow.
And I find this, and I'm like, what is this? I was like, holy moly, is this what we think it is?
Suddenly, the investigators are finding a lot of signals pointing them to Moscow.
One of the funny parts was most of the access was happening in the middle of the night for the employees whose usernames were being used, and in the middle of the day in Moscow.
So they were working regular business hours in Moscow.
Exactly.
A tiny mistake by the hacker leads to the breakthrough they're looking for. One of the Moscow hackers uses his own IP address to log on to his iTunes account just before he uses the same IP address to steal documents from a pharmaceutical company.
It's another moment, one Sunday by myself, reviewing the records and then identifying that IP in his account and then identifying in the logs that we got from the victim companies. I was like, holy moly, this is, and just 4 minutes apart. I said, this is incredible.
The hacker registered that Apple account under his real name, and that means the FBI now knows who he is, Ivan Ermakov.
And then once we learned who this guy was, I said, oh my gosh, this is incredible. This is amazing.
Kang is amazed because American law enforcement has dealt with Ermakov before. He's a veteran of the fearsome Russian GRU military intelligence agency. In 2018, the United States indicted Ermakov along with several other GRU hackers for their alleged roles in the 2016 American presidential election. Ermakov and the others were charged with breaking into email accounts of Hillary Clinton presidential aides and releasing those documents to interfere with the election. Ermakov was also indicted that same year in hacking and related disinformation campaigns targeting anti-doping agencies and sporting federations. That indictment also said the GRU hackers had targeted a nuclear energy company in Pennsylvania and even hacked a chemical lab in Switzerland that was investigating the poisoning of a former Russian spy in Britain. The GRU target list lines up exactly with the interests of the Russian government and its leader, Vladimir Putin. Ermakov is a wanted man, and the FBI says he should be considered armed and dangerous. They start by learning everything they can about Ermakov, who he is, and who he's working for now.
Retired or former Russian military officer with the pedigree, so to speak, of having been indicted twice by the Justice Department for his role in influence campaigns, a hacker for hire.
They learn that Ermakov is young, ambitious, and he's gone to work for a private company. The company is called M13, and it's based in Moscow, in the southern part of the city. The company advertises itself as a cybersecurity firm, and it tells potential customers it has experts who can test a company's cyber defenses. In other words, it's a hacking company sitting in plain sight.
They said, look, we can create teams of black hats who will use hacking techniques to see if they can break into your website, see if they can cover their tracks, see if they can gain access to your most sensitive data, and then we'll tell you what we were able to do so you can fix those holes in your network. But then what they did is they turned around and they used exactly the same techniques that they were advertising to hack into these filing agents in the US.
M13 works for private clients, but on its website it also says the company works for the government of the Russian Federation and the office of the Russian President, Vladimir Putin.
And here's where the story gets really interesting, because all of the FBI agents and federal prosecutors we spoke to were deeply reluctant to discuss anything to do with Vladimir Putin himself, even though M13 said it worked directly for his office. And Putin is a figure looming over this entire story. One thing is clear: there's something very sensitive going on here. The one name we haven't talked at all about is Vladimir Putin. You can't talk about Vladimir Putin.
There's nothing for me to say about that.
You think Vladimir Putin himself was aware of these guys and allowed this to happen?
I can't speculate about that.
So this is a guy who's worked for Vladimir Putin's office.
He did work for the office of the Russian president. That's as much as we can say publicly, because that's what's up on his website.
M13 is run by Ivan Ermakov's new boss, a young, up-and-coming Russian oligarch named Vladislav Klyushin.
The digital trail has now led investigators to the boss of the operation. Klyushin is not, as far as we know, a veteran intelligence officer himself. He's a businessman and an entrepreneur, but he's well connected with Russia's elite intelligence agencies.
He goes to parties with officers of the FSB intelligence agency. That's the successor spy agency to the Cold War-era Russian KGB.
Investigators discover that Klyushin has been running a hack-to-trade scheme right out of the M13 office for years. He's been making millions of dollars by breaking American law.
You're just going to continually trade. You're going to get more money. You're going to use that to trade. It's just free money, printing money. Free, it's just free money.
The evidence investigators gather starts to reveal the story of what's going on behind the scenes in Moscow. They obtain photos, videos, and documents, emails, and text messages that the M13 employees are sending to each other.
All of that paints a picture of the young oligarch at the top of the company and what drove him above all else.
He was a lot like the kind of people that we prosecute for white-collar crime here in the United States every day, who don't really need to turn to white-collar crime in order to be successful, because they already are successful. He was wealthy, he had a very nice house, he had very nice cars, he had a country house, but he wanted more, like so many of our defendants do, and he found a way to get access to easy money, and he took it.
He doesn't have any specialized computer skills, but what he does have are connections. Klyushin knows highly placed people in the Russian intelligence and defense worlds, and he knows a lot of rich Russians. And in June of 2020, he received the Russian Medal of Honor, shown in this photograph, signed by Vladimir Putin himself. He also received this award from the FSB. We don't know exactly what Klyushin did to earn this spying award, but it's signed by the deputy director of the FSB. We also don't know exactly how or when they meet, but the oligarch Klyushin and the hacker Ermakov socialize together with Klyushin's wife and Ermakov's girlfriend. And more than that, the two men strike up a business partnership and something of a bromance. They're in near constant contact. They go out drinking, and they sauna together naked. They text each other about Billions, the American TV drama about corrupt Wall Street traders.
I work so hard, if not to do what we want, when we want.
Ermakov asks Klyushin if he's seen the final episode of season 4 of the show. That's the one where a U.S. attorney tries to prosecute a young, up-and-coming hedge fund billionaire. There are birthday parties, fancy dinners, golf, and rooftop barbecues with the M13 team. Klyushin takes the team to the World Cup in Russia, a huge global event and a point of pride for Vladimir Putin's regime. Eating, drinking, celebrating, and showing off their Russian colors. Klyushin and Ermakov share a fondness for helicopter skiing. They shop for expensive things. Klyushin buys a luxury apartment for Ermakov and buys himself a $3 million yacht called the 7K from a shipyard in Cyprus. Klyushin texts his employee Ermakov how much he enjoys being with him.
We spend a lot of time together. I feel good and calm. The fact that we can walk home together and have a beer, or play golf, or simply send everyone to hell, knowing you're close.
This truly sounds like a nice declaration of love, like a declaration of love to a girl.
I mean, it sounds like a bromance.
It was definitely a bromance between those two.
Was it a romance?
I don't believe so, no. But they were very, very close. They spent a lot of time together, and they definitely liked each other. They were friends.
Running a big cybersecurity company and a secret insider trading scam at the same time is exhausting. Klyushin texts his pal Ermakov,
I'm fucking tired rushing all the time. Need a rest.
he fixates on the new yacht.
At this point, I want nothing except the boat. This I want very much.
When Ermakov responds to that text, it's as if he's become his boss's therapist, trying to diagnose the root of Klyushin's problems.
Then you need nothing. Enjoy your life. You have everything.
Ermakov tries to convey some wisdom.
I read somewhere that if you keep buying while you have everything, it means you're unhappy.
He had accomplished the American dream, but he'd accomplished it in Russia. But it doesn't seem like that was ever enough for him. He wanted to accomplish more.
Where did this unhappiness and greed come from? Klyushin, who was born in 1980, comes from humble origins. He's the son of a single teen mother, and he's never known his father. He started working at age 13 to help lift his family out of poverty. But his brain power took him far, graduating from the Moscow Academy of Economics and Law and going on to get a master's degree in management. He married his second wife, Zhana, at an exclusive country club outside Moscow, producing a lavish wedding video fit for an up-and-coming oligarch. He has 5 children between his 2 marriages.
Well, you know, they say money can't buy happiness, and that's as true in Russia, apparently, as it is in the United States.
It may have been that deep emotional longing for more that led Klyushin to his next scheme: professionalization of the hack-to-trade operation, building up a hedge fund designed to prey on American companies with stolen information.
We learned during the investigation that he brought in investors, significant participants in the Russian business community, who gave Mr. Klyushin their money. He invested it for them using the services of his hacker, and made them approximately $15 million, taking 50 to 60% of the profits as his cut, the kind of cut that I think would make a hedge fund manager blush.
He was hoping to get investors to put money in a fund that they thought would be legitimately invested, and in fact, he'd be trading on inside information.
He wanted to create Insider Trading LLC.
Exactly.
The scam is churning out profits, but Klyushin is right that he needs a break. He's running ragged, and he's beginning to make mistakes of his own. And his employees start to worry that the boss is going to blow up the whole operation.
Vlad, you are exposing our organization. This is bad.
The Russian M13 hacking gang has perfected their hack-to-trade scheme, and Klyushin is making more money than he's ever seen before.
He had the money to live the good life, and I'm sure he just wanted to maintain that lifestyle.
To celebrate, Klyushin buys 4 Porsche sports cars for himself, Ermakov, and investors in the scheme. He attaches vanity license plates featuring the number 13 in honor of their company, M13. Inside the operation, M13's computer screens are flowing with stolen stock market information. Klyushin's team pores over American corporate earnings reports before the financial world can see them. At one point, they focus in on Tesla, the electric car company. M13 hackers steal Tesla's draft earnings release and, seeing the results, buy shares in advance. Klyushin sends a text to 2 of the investors in the scheme, giving them a heads up.
Pay attention to shares of Tesla now and tomorrow after 16:30 and on how much they go up.
After the market closes, Tesla reports its earnings. But of course, Klyushin knows what's coming. It's a monster number, more than $6.8 billion in revenue.
This was an incredibly historic quarter for Tesla. In fact, we delivered more cars in this quarter than we did in all of 2016 in a single quarter.
Wall Street is dazzled. It's much better news than traders expected, and Tesla's shares soar. In the second quarter of 2019, the M13 team steals documents showing that sneaker company Skechers is going to surprise the market with positive news. The M13 traders buy stock in Skechers, betting the price will go up. They make more than $1 million on that single trade.
They're making millions of dollars just sitting at their desks, breaking into these American companies stealing information day after day after day and just trading on it.
The gang's earnings get even better with cosmetics company Ulta Beauty. M13's stolen documents showed the earnings were a miss, and what's worse for shareholders, the company updates its financial guidance downward. The M13 gang shorts the stock, betting it's going to go down. They're right. Ulta's price plummets by 30% when the news comes out. For M13, that's great news. The gang makes almost $2 million overnight on a single trade. They gleefully text details of how much they and their investors are making. Klyushin reports to Ermakov that one investor had already made profits of close to $1 million, nearly tripling his investment. A second investor had made profits of close to $700,000, nearly doubling his money.
They don't even ask why so anymore.
The money is literally piling up. Klyushin has a safe in which he stashes stacks of $100 bills, gradually filling it until at one point it holds $3 million in cash. The M13 team knows they're playing a dangerous game.
If you're doing this stuff for a long period of time, there's going to be some slip up.
Perhaps as a warning to himself, Klyushin keeps a printout of a Reuters article about a Ukrainian hacker getting sentenced to prison in a U.S. insider trading case.
There are moments when you've found that tantalizing clue and you realize that you're breaking open this case and unraveling this scheme. We had a moment like that when we obtained a Threema chat. This was an encrypted chat among our hackers, a chat that they never thought anyone outside of them would see. They were unguarded in that conversation, and they were having explicit conversations about what they were doing as they were doing it.
Klyushin uses the Threema app to send pictures of his outside investors to the rest of the gang. He tells his M13 employees the investors want to know how trading is going.
What did we earn today? Our comrades are wondering.
Ermakov, the veteran intelligence officer, is alarmed. He immediately texts his boss.
Vlad, you are exposing our organization. This is bad. Vlad, stop sending to Threema.
So sorry.
And that's how they get you, and you end up as a defendant in a courtroom. It was a bad move now.
Sorry, did a dumb thing.
When investigators read these texts, they're stunned.
I'm just looking at your face, and I can see that you are astonished that you got this kind of access to this information.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those breaks in a case that you sort of dream about, right? When you actually have the criminals speaking in unvarnished terms about the crime and admitting that it's a crime.
How did you feel when you saw those messages?
I mean, those are case enders, and they were.
The M13 crew is also learning that winning on Wall Street is harder than it looks. Even with stolen documents, insider trading is not easy. These are hardened Russian hackers. They're very smart, brilliant even in their field, but they just don't have any experience in finance.
Even when they had inside information, they weren't 100% accurate or correct in their trading. They didn't get it right 100% of the time. Sometimes they misread the information that they had, sometimes they missed something that was in there, or sometimes the market didn't react in a way that they expected. When they didn't trade on material non-public information, they were actually terrible traders who lost money more than they made money.
The anguished texts of the M13 gang sound like a bizarro version of the banter you'd hear on a Wall Street trading floor.
What are you thinking to do with Roku?
So far, there is no reason for such a drastic fall.
We acted too hastily.
This was not us who were hasty. It is market that is acting strangely.
Should we wait for comeback?
I think so. Too big of a loss otherwise. Let's see what's going to be happening today. The market situation is complicated. Whatever should be going up, going down, and vice versa.
The gang comes to some tough conclusions about their own performance in the market.
We implement poor trading ideas due to low-level competencies as traders.
We suck in placing stops and take profits.
But they are good enough to make $93 million in less than 3 years. They're so successful, they begin to raise suspicions at Saxo Bank, the Danish online broker M13 is using to place trades. The bank schedules a call with M13 to ask how exactly they're doing this. And for the first time, the M13 gang is on the defensive. Klyushin's solution is to tell a pack of lies. On the call, Klyushin lies to a bank official, saying that M13 has developed an app called Preston that analyzes social media and the internet to forecast stock trends, which is why M13 has been so successful. A translator relays Klyushin's Russian into English.
He assured us that they are not using any kind of insider information. They only use what is available in public sources.
Klyushin is forced to explain the spectacular success the company had in its Tesla trades. His story is that M13 based its Tesla trades on Elon Musk's infamous 420 funding secured tweet, when the billionaire rocked financial markets by saying he was considering taking Tesla private at that price. Of course, that's not true either.
And he also gave an example how they acted upon when Elon Musk published last year about 420 this intention or whatever that happened, and then they were short by the minute before the publication.
This is Klyushin's actual voice on the call. It's another lie. Klyushin says M13 doesn't have any outside investors. But of course it does. He's been texting the investors' pictures to his M13 team. And then Klyushin makes things worse for M13 when he offers to share a copy of the Preston app with Saxo Bank. On the call, his employees panic, knowing the app isn't ready. They stall frantically. A spokesperson for Saxo Bank told CNBC that the bank can't comment on former client relationships. But the spokesperson said that whenever our control systems detect potentially suspicious trading behavior, we report to the relevant authorities on our own initiative. Klyushin and his M13 co-conspirators have no way to know it. But in Washington, BJ Kang and his team at the FBI are getting closer and closer to unraveling their scheme.
Was there ever a situation where you felt like this thing might fall apart? Like
Every single day, every single day.
Day?
No, I say that facetiously, but we collected so much information. We've identified so many traders, but then as we got closer to say, now, you know what, now we have enough to actually charge people. Now we got to really be careful. We got to make sure that these guys don't know the FBI is involved. Radio silent.
Even as M13 tangles with Saxo Bank, Vladislav Klyushin is trying to become something like the Bernie Madoff of the cyber age. This could be enormously destabilizing to American financial markets. The FBI has to act fast. But how?
So at that point, it seems like this changes from being an investigation where you're gathering information, and now it becomes something more like a manhunt.
A manhunt usually is when you have no idea where the person was. In this case, we knew exactly where he was. It was a question of whether he would go to a place that we could rely on our relationships to secure an arrest.
That was really probably the most frustrating part of our investigation, is realizing we now know who's done this, we know how they've done it, we know how much money they've made. We've actually managed to stop the crime in its tracks. But are we ever going to be able to lay hands on these guys because they're in a country that's not going to extradite them? But we just laid in wait and we watched.
Ermakov knows he's been indicted twice by the United States, which means travel to any nation that has an extradition treaty with the Americans would be enormously risky. As a former GRU officer, he's probably been given government guidance not to travel. Still, he yearns to see the world. And Klyushin, ever confident and always willing to use his connections to help his friends, wants to help him do that. In text messages between the two in 2019, they discuss how Ermakov could travel. Klyushin sends Ermakov a scenic picture of himself traveling outside Russia. Ermakov:
Very beautiful. I wonder if I could do that someday.
Klyushin responds with an offer.
Easy, but under a different full name. I will arrange it myself.
Ermakov:
Do you think that a different full name would do the trick?
Klyushin:
Yes, 100% we will definitely go to Europe. I don't know about London or America.
Ermakov:
Well, okay.
Klyushin says he has asked his high-level intelligence contacts, using the acronym for the FSB's Department of Military Counterintelligence, which exists to hunt for Western spies inside the Russian army. Klyushin:
I checked with DVKR.
I can live with that.
Let's not delay and start traveling now.
I got the hint and I'm working in that direction.
There's no evidence that Ermakov ever got that fake passport to allow him to travel. But Klyushin is brimming with confidence, and he really, really wants to go skiing in the Alps. And then it happens. In March of 2021, the FBI discovers Klyushin has chartered a private jet to fly from Moscow to Switzerland. They set up a plan to capture him.
It was pretty nerve-wracking.
It's a breathless moment. You're literally holding your breath to see how this is going to play out and whether we're ultimately going to be able to grab him. We had exceptional cooperation from our partners in Switzerland. We knew that he was on this plane, we knew where he was going and when he was going to land. They ultimately made the arrest. He landed on this private plane. He was actually in ski gear, getting off the plane, ready to board a helicopter that was waiting for him. He was about to go skiing, and the Swiss agents were waiting for him. They swooped in, they arrested him, and minutes after they arrested him, his wife sent a text message. The text message that she sent was to his co-conspirator, Mr. Ermakov. That was devastating evidence of their conspiracy. She sees handcuffs being placed on her husband, and the first person she reaches out to is the former Russian military intelligence officer that we've identified as the actual hacker.
After a diplomatic tug of war with the Swiss government, the United States secures Vladislav Klyushin's extradition to face his indictment on 4 counts related to the insider trading operation. Ermakov and another M13 employee are also indicted in the scheme, but both men remain in Russia, where they are beyond the reach of U.S. law enforcement. A government plane flies Klyushin to Boston, Massachusetts, where he goes on trial before a federal jury. And in February 2023, he's convicted of securities fraud, wire fraud, gaining unauthorized access to computers, and conspiracy to commit those crimes. He's sentenced to 9 years in an American prison. Klyushin is also ordered to forfeit more than $34 million and pay restitution in an amount to be determined later. Ivan Ermakov, who warned his boss about ending up in a courtroom, remains at large. He's presumably still in Moscow, and other M13 employees also remain free. Vladislav Klyushin is sent to the Federal Correctional Institution, Fort Dix in New Jersey, to serve out his sentence. And that would seem to be the end of the story. But there's more to this, because as I was reporting out this project, a source connected me with a former Russian spy, now living in the United States under an assumed name. He knows all about Vladislav Klyushin, Ivan Ermakov, and the whole M13 insider trading operation. And what he told me puts everything that you've just heard in an entirely new perspective. To protect him from retribution from the Russian government, we've agreed to disguise his identity. We hired an actor to replace his voice, but every word here comes directly from the former Russian spy.
My job was to collect pretty much the same information on behalf for the Russian state from the West for my sources. So this guy's got busted, okay, but this is just one small tiny piece of what is going on.
This man knows Russian intelligence operations from the inside out because he's a former Russian spy. An officer of the FSB, he switched sides, came to the United States, and lives here now under an assumed identity. He's wary of reprisal from the Russian government for betraying his country. So we sat down with him in person at a location inside the United States that we have agreed not to reveal for his safety. To start with, what name should we use with you?
John, Mike, whatever you want. I guess that's the best option.
Okay, John or Mike, you spent a lot of years in the Russian FSB, in the intelligence services. Tell me a little bit about that experience. How long were you a Russian spy?
Around 16 years in service. I was an operative. My job was to recruit sources among Russian foreign businessmen and use them as assets for the Russian state, collect information, so on. Primarily fieldwork was finance, its banking system and financial sector itself.
And at some point, you decided you had to leave.
Yes.
Why was that?
It was a personal matter. My life was in danger, and not only mine, but my wife's life as well, and I had no choice at all.
So you came to the United States?
Yes. I mean, let's say the Americans brought us to the United States.
John, or Mike, says the Klyushin operation was just a small part of an overall Russian strategy designed to respond unconventionally to American financial sanctions. He describes a strategy in which Vladimir Putin authorizes his top intelligence officers to wreak havoc on Western economies.
It's a war right now happening between Russia and the West, or Eastern-West confrontation. Finances and banks and financial sector itself is just one of the battlefields where the whole thing is happening. So they have to be creative. So the cyber attacks or the insider trading, all of the stuff, it's kind of a weapon and tools they can use against the West.
He says many of his former bosses in Russian intelligence are stealing Western financial information for their own personal profit. How often does that happen in the Russian intelligence services?
I would say that's pretty normal practice. The Russians do operate freely inside the Western financial system as an operatives, and they have assets.
You're saying Russian spies in the United States have been stealing financial information from American companies for years and profiting from it?
Sure, they do. Not Russian spies are profiting from it, but the people to whom they've been delivering this information. Yeah, that's for sure.
So they're bosses back in Moscow?
Bosses back in Moscow or companies which are affiliated with the Kremlin and Kremlin operations.
So Russian spies are insider trading in the United States all the time?
Well, I only can say from my own personal experience, but what I say from my career, what I was doing, that was pretty common, yeah.
Did you see insider trading in U.S. markets while you were inside the FSB?
I saw the information which was extracted.
And you're saying it's more than just cyber attacks, it's also spying in person?
It is most important part. The cyber attack, again, it's traceable. But if you have a mole inside, hypothetical mole, inside a private business company, right? This person can sit there for years, decades. No one's going to say anything, as long as this person is not doing anything stupid. He's not buying some Bugattis, Lamborghinis, Porsches, and so on.
And you know for a fact from your own experience that there are moles inside American companies passing this kind of information now?
I can't say this kind of information, but that was my job to recruit foreign businessmen, including Americans. So yes.
And how did you do that? How did you recruit them?
Charm.
You are charming.
No, I'm kidding. It's a long process. You need to collect information, you need to pick the person. It's a long process. Like a shark, you have to circle around.
What this spy is saying is pretty shocking, and it has profound implications for the U.S. financial system. I wanted to check that with some American experts. Are there more gangs like Klyushin's? Are there more Russian intelligence vets hacking into American companies? Google's Sandra Joyce is a cybersecurity expert, and from her perch in the private sector, she's seen it all. What strikes her about the Klyushin M13 crime, though, is just how easy the insider trading hacking was.
We know that the GRU has some incredible capabilities. If you think about it, they were behind turning off the lights in Kyiv in 2015 and 2016. If you recall the NotPetya incident where worldwide shipping came to a halt, that was the GRU. So they're capable of doing some pretty incredible hacks.
So for a guy like Ermakov, this was easy pickings.
For a guy like him in the GRU, this probably would have been on the easy side for them.
Do you worry about guys with that kind of experience bleeding off into the private sector and sort of setting themselves up as, pirates with a letter of marque, kind of working in Russia with that kind of skill set, attacking American companies?
Well, right now we are seeing this surge of ransomware and extortion to American companies, and that is coming out of Russia primarily and also Eastern Europe. So we do feel that it's a huge concern and a national security issue for sure.
And I talked with Joe Bonavolanta, who ran the FBI's Boston division during the investigation. He says M13 is probably not the only cyber-enabled insider trading gang out there.
Do you think this kind of hacking to trade is happening more often than we know?
I do. When you look at the defendants in this case, and there was in excess of approximately 90 some odd $90 million that were generated or made from this criminal scheme, you can imagine when you extrapolate that across other groups or individuals that are conducting this, it's significant.
Do you think Ermakov is out there insider trading right now?
That I couldn't answer. I don't know what he's doing right now.
I mean, if he doesn't plan on going skiing in Switzerland, he can sit in Moscow and do this all day long.
Well, he could potentially do that, but think of the additional risk he's taking where he is now the subject of 3 very significant federal indictments.
Yeah, but he seems to shrug those off, right? I mean, they just pile up in an office in Washington somewhere. If he doesn't leave Moscow or doesn't leave Russia, he's kind of untouchable.
But I don't think he would shrug those off if, in fact, he did wind up, traveling one day and he was picked up. It's that specter that hangs over these individual shoulders really for the rest of their lives, which is not an easy way to live.
And finally, I wanted to get an answer from the Russian spy, John or Mike, about Vladimir Putin's role in all of this.
What's in it for Vladimir Putin? He allows his Russian intelligence services to gather this information, trade in their own accounts, make themselves wealthy. What does he get from that?
I'm not sure. I'm not his accountant. And I guess no one knows. But as for the state companies, let's say, state-affiliated companies or business manipulated with the Kremlin, that's a huge, huge benefit. So they imagine that they are 1 or 2 steps ahead of the West in this case.
And is this kind of a perk or a benefit for Putin to offer to his top guys and sort of say, I'll allow you to do this, get yourselves rich, as long as you're destabilizing Western businesses, that's okay with me?
Imagine how great from the state perspective. In this case, you pretty much have guys who we allow to do whatever they want, to make money as much as they want. And they don't need to pay them at all. They can do it on their own, like pretty much just, they are freelancers.
In other words, Putin seemingly gets free hacking services, destabilizes the West, and his trusted insiders get rich. It's a win all the way around. And John, or Mike, leaves us with one other thought. His theory is that Klyushin and Ermakov didn't discover that the filing agents were the best target on their own. This spy says that someone else probably handed that tip to Klyushin and Ermakov, and that someone may have gotten a cut of the profits.
Someone guided them there.
Who was that, do you know?
Guys who know the business, so spies who do the job in this line of work. And they figure out, that's the weakest spot, how we can get the information.
Wow, I hadn't even thought of that.
Well, because you're a good guy, I'm bad guy.
And that's where our story ends, for now. It was pretty clear from our conversations that the United States government is still watching Ivan Ermakov, waiting to see if he ever takes that ski trip. And if what the former Russian spy tells us is correct, there's a whole hidden world of Russian intelligence insider trading for the FBI to investigate next. For CNBC, I'm Eamon Javers. It took our investigative team countless hours to unravel the mysteries of Putin's traitor, chasing down sources, going deep into a criminal web spun by those at the highest levels of global power. You can join us in every step of this gripping journey by following and listening to our limited podcast series called The Crimes of Putin's Traitor. It's the expanded universe of this real-life thriller featuring exclusive spy interviews and behind-the-scenes reporting. Follow our series now wherever you get your podcasts and be the first to get notified about new episodes.